Men will try to replace women. We're going to see a real push within the cultures and parts of society that are possessed by this Martian impulse to actually get rid of the woman and have, false wombs. And when that Martian impulse becomes really, really bad, it's essentially playing God. So what ends up happening is they think that they are God, that they're everything. And because they have this hyper futuristic scientific way of being, they will actually just dominate the feminine entirely and begin to think that they can just create designer babies, that they can just use genetic modification to create forms and people better than God can. And that holy process that exists inside the woman, inside the womb, the woman's ability to bring perfect life in this world will be no longer respected potentially. And there's going to be a huge push to do genetic splicing and to have artificial wombs. And this is actually removing the feminine principle from society. So be very careful with this, because they're going to say that it's going to liberate women, that it's going to be better for women. There are certain things happening on the planet today that are also going to increase infertility. And this will also make it seem like having artificial wombs is better for women. But make no mistake, this is an attempt to remove the woman from society, to remove the feminine from the earth. And this is what happens when the masculine Martian regressive impulse becomes out of control and there isn't any counterbalance for it. They don't want to be humbled and integrate their feminine. They want to dominate it and destroy it. That's how this works. And I want to be clear also that this exists within the New Age and within spirituality with the alien god myth, with the Mars origin story, with the Anunnaki myth. Everything that we've covered in season 1 is the regressive Mars impulse. You know, this idea that you can just hybridize humanity, that you as an individual can create a better creation than God through a woman, through the womb. It is removing the womb from creation. If you just take a bunch of genetics from animals and from like a person, you're saying that you can create life better than God can. And it is a completely backwards and divergent way. It's not even creation, it's actually destruction. We are having destruction being pitched to us as though it is creation. Hybridization is not a creative force. Genetic manipulation, genetic modification is not a creative force. It is the masculine essence that is trying to get rid of the feminine, because it is the feminine and part of the feminine mysteries, the great feminine mysteries that have been almost gone today. That is the secrets of conception, the secrets of birthing, the secrets of creating little human beings, the secrets of pulling a soul into your womb. The secrets of conception, the secrets of creation are the woman's. They are the feminines. They don't belong to science. So we need to bring science way back in check, because it's in a very precarious position today. I mean, look at it. If you look out into the New Age, if you look out into spirituality, the number one origin myth for mankind is that we were created through hybridization and through genetic splicing. That is the Mars origin myth. That is the regressive Martian impulse, removing the role of the feminine in creation. And that is why planets get destroyed. That's why every planet that these Anunnaki beings or these strange entities that they communicate with has been destroyed. Because when you mess with the polarities and you dominate the feminine, you destroy the planet. The Earth sigil is the Venus symbol upside down. It's the symbol of the feminine upside down. And one of the greatest mysteries is that the feminine is an embodiment of matter, of the planet, matter, mutter. And you can't, if you destroy the feminine, you will destroy the planet, for sure. We have to be in harmony with one another. So this idea that humanity has been hybridized from into creation by aliens, that's not a creation myth. That is the degradation of humanity. It is the removal of the feminine from creation. And when you accept that mythology, when you accept that myth, you remove her too. You remove her within yourself and you feed into it in the world. We have to understand what we're doing by taking on these beliefs and participating in this propaganda. So this is a culture. This regressive Mars force is a culture. It is the culture of genetic modification and the Gattaca society. It is the removal of women from creation entirely, eventually. And this is why in so much sci-fi, you'll see this weird theme of women needed for procreation again on Mars. Mars needs moms, or Mars needs women. And even in, various Walt Disney cartoons.
Through the years, there have been frequent rumors that Martians disguised as Earthmen walk amongst us. These stories are perhaps strengthened by the thousands of reports of unidentified flying objects passing in an endless procession across our skies. Today, a space-conscious public avidly consumes tons of story material about life on other planets. A typical cosmic soap opera usually begins at a very ultra-secret government space project. The hero is a young electronics genius who is always busy formulating new laws of thermodynamics and astrophysics. The heroine is his secretary, efficient, hardworking, and rather attractive. Of course, the villain is a mechanical robot from Mars. He is usually controlled by a Martian mastermind whose appearance is too horrible to reveal at this time. The escape device is a late-model electrophlegmatic flying saucer. The story plot usually concerns the lack of some precious element on Mars, such as water, or uranium, or women.
Colonel, the message is, Mars needs women.
These were the words that startled the world. This was the reason for an invasion that shocked the Earth. Martians, beings from outer space, with one prime objective. Women, Earth women, to help repopulate their dying planet, to bring new blood to an ancient civilization. Beauty and the beasts. Only the beasts were men. Martian men. Every woman checked and double-checked. Only the most perfect, the most beautiful. Is Earth to be ravished because Mars needs women?
That's because this truth and this reality exists deep in our subconscious mind and deep in our spiritual memory, and we are being called today to understand it. Because as we move out of this period of intense individuality and we rise into the next planetary expression, we will need it will be based more in the feminine. And we will need this wisdom, and we will need that force to project us forward. So destroying it is to destroy ourselves. And of course, if you get rid of the feminine impulse, that also means that you're getting rid of emotionality. You're getting rid of of compassion. You're getting rid of the natural force within all of us that reminds us that we're interconnected. You're getting rid of nurturing. You're getting rid of a massive spiritual connection to the cosmos, because it is Mary or it's Sophia that connects with the Father or the Solar Logos or the Godhead directly, right? She is the go-between. And so when you remove that, it doesn't go very well. And so we need that to stay active. We need that to stay healthy. And in order to do that, we need to understand very clearly what the occult meaning of Mars is and how it's going on in our world and how it does seek to destroy the feminine. And again, you know, just like transhumanism, they're going to make transhumanism seem extremely attractive to people. The same thing with getting rid of the feminine in women. They're going to make that seem empowering to women. It's already happening. And so as women, we need to also not accept this and turn inward and develop our sacred femininity and not have that be manipulated away from us by accepting these bizarre cosmologies about genetic manipulation and artificial wombs and allowing this futuristic Martian impulse to destroy everything in sight. Okay? And of course, you know, this leads to an evolutionary dead end. So there is nothing productive about this. This is an energy and a force that's out of control. You know, there is no evolution once this impulse gets to the point where it is today. It is pure devolution. It is pure regression for humanity. So there really is no benefit for humanity to support this. All of our benefit is in coming together and confronting this today. The other thing that's really fascinating is that we all know this. You know this. And many science fiction writers have known this. Many people who make movies about Mars and about just science fiction space stuff know this. Because it is the most popular theme in science fiction, is this Martian impulse, especially with films and books about Mars. It's the same themes over and over again. So this is something that we know that's within inside all of us. It's not something that's beyond us. It's something that is deeply, deeply, deeply within us that we have a choice to manifest again and go down this dark road or not. And this is why I've created Mars Mysteries, is so that we can look very deeply into this regressive impulse and very consciously reject it and bring that masculine impulse back in line, bring the feminine impulse back in line, and actually know what we're doing. So it's really interesting how a lot of the movies and books about Mars actually feature the removal of women from society. There's several things about that. They all usually feature transhumanism, or at the very least, they feature robots, often chimeras as well, because part of the Martian impulse, again, is genetic modification and genetic splicing. So it's like they take the human genome and they'll splice it with animals, plants, you know, whatever they can, and eventually they even merge with the mineral kingdom, which is transhumanism. And so you really can clearly see that a lot of these creations about Mars by these brilliant science fiction writers and films and things like this, they're clearly a psychic vision that is portrayed as fiction, which happens a lot. It happens a lot that these writers are incredibly psychic and they're actually sharing a prophecy with us. And so let's use that. Let's look at that as that's being what it is. Another common theme is surviving on a dead planet. So obviously when that Martian impulse becomes so dominating and so present in society, it leads to death. It also leads to the worship of death as well. It's a death cult. And so what ends up happening is when you see a society that has been taken by that Mars impulse, you see, it's usually portrayed with somebody on Mars trying to bring it to life again. You know, of course, through playing God and often the same ways that got them in that position at all. It's a repeating loop. And so you also see lots of science fiction movies that really take on that regressive Mars impulse as people are trying to travel, you know, millions of light years in a dead cosmos. You know, the idea that we're surrounded by planets and we're surrounded by stars, but there doesn't seem to be any parallel life to ourselves. It's always a little bit off. It's usually a little bit different. Not always in science fiction, but usually it is, especially in modern science fiction. And that's because that's portraying that when you become imbalanced within the Mars impulse like that, it is not a creative position to be in. So you can't actually enter into other stars or planetary systems that have life because you are in a death impulse, because you are imbalanced. And so that is all you perceive within the world. And also the Martian impulse also really only pays attention to the 3D landscape of the cosmos and thinks that everything begins here. Everything begins in the material plane. And there isn't a whole lot of understanding, especially with cosmic spirituality, that the cosmos doesn't work according to the material laws that we think that they do. It's actually it actually adheres to more spiritual laws, which is why they have such a problem with various different things that these groups try to do. And so we are deep in a regressive Mars impulse. We need to look very closely at this, and we need to understand because we are right in the center of it. And it's time for us to begin making a different path. Perhaps we can't get rid of, you know, this impulse in the world. People have free will to connect with and align with whatever impulses they want within themselves. And I think that we're also at a point where people can't help but be possessed by this. They literally don't see the world in a healthy way anymore. They can't. And so it is not necessarily, you know, a way of healing everyone or convincing everyone, but it's definitely self-responsibility and understanding that a parallel impulse can be created besides this impulse that allows us to function in a lot better way and at least not be dominated by it. Okay? So that's really the goal of this series and of this conversation. I really want to nail home here is this idea of limited perception. So when somebody is possessed or streaming into themselves this lower Mars impulse, this regressive Martian impulse, their perception is not like somebody who is channeling within themselves that transcended Mars impulse. You know, they may look the same physically, we're all human here, but inside, if you were to see the energy body and you were to see the impulses that they were streaming, it would look like a very different individual to somebody who is streaming the higher impulse of Mars. Okay, so we all look the same here, but what's happening in regards to our level of cosmic initiation, the kinds of planetary energies that we're streaming into us, their condition is very different. And that's very important to know. And so when you get caught up in this lower Martian impulse, individuals are not functioning within their minds and within their perception in the same way. This is something that we really have to understand, especially if you're a spiritual person, if you're a sensitive person, you know, you have to understand that these people are not seeing the world the way that you're seeing the world. Okay, they're not seeing it in a collaborative way, in a creative way. They're seeing it in the way of a regressive Mars ideology, which is might is right, which is an obsession with the material plane. It's a completely different ideology. And this is something that takes a lot of maturity to understand because there's this impulse within us, within people, I think that makes us all want to be the same, makes us all want to be on the same level, the same playing field, because it's easy. It's easy. And if we make everyone the same, then we don't have to go inwards and understand the nuances, the dark and light within ourselves. By making things too egalitarian in our minds and society, we're actually hiding from ourselves. And so we have to understand that we are spiritual beings. There's more spiritual energy existing with connected to ourselves, you know, than there is materialized energy. We're completely and totally spiritual beings. And because of that, we have a totally unique story, a totally unique incarnational story, a totally unique history as our soul has incarnated in various different spheres in the solar system school. And so we have to understand that everybody is different and everybody is unique. We are all connected. We are all catalyzed by Christ consciousness. We're all have that similarity within us. We all have the same potentials, but we're not all at the same level of evolution. We need to understand this going forward. And it doesn't mean that we are cruel to people. It doesn't mean that we are judgmental or anything like that. But we have to be real, and we have to acknowledge that there is diversity in perception. And when you are channeling that regressive Mars impulse, and that is your Mars energy, that is that planetary sphere for that individual, what ends up happening is they can't actually see the higher planes or perceive them properly. All they can perceive is the 8th sphere. And this is very important. So when you're possessed by that lower Mars impulse, all that individual can see is the 8th sphere, or the lower astral plane. And they will think that that 8th sphere or lower astral plane, which has different little divisions in it, different layers in it according to time, they'll think that that whole thing is the cosmos. And so it's a complete illusion. It's a complete delusion. They'll practice black magic. You know, black magic is rooted in ego, in selfishness. In might is right, they'll practice that. They'll see things that have to do with more lighter magic or humane things as being weak. You know, they'll work with demonic entities. They'll interpret higher truths in a profane way or an inverted way. So the moment that they do try to work with something that takes a lot of attunement and a lot of balance for the individual to actually understand and receive, they'll try to enter that plane of consciousness or receive a piece of information or do something psychically, and it'll come back to them as a complete inversion because they're not advanced enough to access that plane. And when you try to access a plane that you're not initiated into, or you're not balanced enough to actually access, or part of the Akashic records, you're not actually initiated or balanced enough to access, you're not advanced enough to access in your abilities, then you will receive an inversion of truth. You'll receive it in a warped and distorted way. In order to be a good psychic and do high magic or do, you know, actually manifest things and actually go into these spiritual conditions and pull out information, you have to be very, very, very balanced and very, very, very aligned. Everybody is psychic. Everybody can go into the higher planes, but not everybody can access certain things in certain places. You have to be very balanced in your essence. So you can try to, but you're going to come back and you're going to get a complete inversion of reality. You're going to get things all mixed up and conflated because there isn't enough of your being that is initiated into that consciousness to receive it fully. And so you get some weird mixed up thing. And then that's how you become trapped in the lower planes, and you get this weird inversion of the cosmos. You get this inversion of God and people worshiping it, and you get inverted symbols and you get weird stuff, right? Because it's that need for power, that desire to access these planes without first developing yourself first. The desire to have leadership positions or influential positions when the individual is not trained enough for that. They're not ready for that, but yet they seek those positions anyway for their own personal gain and power. It is a complete, that ends up leading into all of what I'm talking about. So that interpretation of higher truth in a profaned way or in a backwards way is a huge reason why all of the occult symbols are inverted when it comes to black magic, why there is the obsession with certain things and whatever. It's literally just not being able to fully interact with these concepts. And over time, they turn into their own religion. So you have these warped ideologies or that just turn into their own religions. That's the Mars impulse. And so, but it could work, obviously, if it was a feminine society too that wasn't being clarified and having the mental development that the male brings too. It can happen in a feminine society too. It's just that that was the prior cycle of humanity. It's not the cycle that we're in now. Okay? So ultimately, when you are in this backwards Martian energy stream, when that's your Martian energy, that's your connection to Mars, you work within a completely fallen plane of consciousness. You work with fallen beings and fallen entities. When you go into psychic, when you try to get the information for inspiration or for spiritual purposes, you get the lowest possible timeline there is, which is why, you know, it's all about hybridization and genetic modification, that humanity was created through hybridization and genetic modification, and they have to evolve through hybridization and genetic modification. You know, this is all part of that backwards fallen consciousness and impulse, and the backwards or regressive timeline of humanity. This all has to do with that.
Let's summarize what we have covered today. Every human being is a living snapshot of the solar system. Each planet can be in a different condition depending on the individual's level of spiritual progression in our solar system school. Each planet also relates or sends impulses to the Earth. These impulses can be positive or negative depending on the evolutionary cycle of each planetary sphere. Mars has been in a regressive condition in relation to the Earth, and although many souls are able to transcend the Mars impulse, some are not. This inverted Mars impulse affects human consciousness in such a way that it drives the individual into a materialist perception, and this materialist perception ultimately leads to a completely inverted and regressive view of reality. This has created a regressive, materialist culture on the Earth that cannot perceive nor understand higher worlds, and they do not understand the very soul essence within themselves. If an individual is to stay locked in that impulse, that regressive Martian impulse, they will seek to compensate by becoming hyper-futuristic. We can see this impulse in science fiction around Mars, where Mars seems to always become an unnatural world of transhumanism, death, chaos, and deformation. The draw towards using technology for occult rites and seeing AI as a god is also an inevitability for those trapped in this impulse. You see, if they cannot fully perceive spiritual laws and forces, then they will attempt to relate to them in the only way they can, through material forms. You see, even though someone has cut themselves off from their spirit and from the spiritual planes, they still seek to engage with them, they still seek to interact with them. But instead of going inward and developing themselves in order to do so organically, instead they create strange material forms as an inversion and mockery of genuine spiritual growth and discovery. Thank you everyone for joining me today. In our next episode, we are going to explore an example of a spiritual group that could be embodying the regressive Mars impulse. Until then, if you enjoy my work, please consider supporting me by making a donation or becoming a premium member on my website. That helps me keep the lights on over here, and don't forget, I'm completely supported by you.